She's the co-chair of American Bridge 21st Century, a progressive research and communications organization. Of course, she is the former president of Planned Parenthood. Cecile, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I want to get your reaction to those arguments on Wednesday. Did anything the justices say shock you?
Well, I mean, the whole proceeding, yes, I think was shocking in that there was, for justices who had gotten on to the bench pledging to respect precedent and pledging to actually, and who said they understood that Roe was the law of the land, they clearly took a completely different tack. I think the suggestion that was referenced earlier by Justice Barrett, of course, who was put onto the court at the very last minute, right before a national election in which Donald Trump was defeated, her suggestion that somehow women should be forced to carry all pregnancies to term, regardless of the circumstances, because they could simply give their child up under these safe haven laws, I think was probably the most disturbing and most offensive thing that was said. But I also you asked earlier, you were saying about what the Solicitor General of Mississippi said too, and one thing I just want to point out, he said that the people should decide. And actually, one of the great ironies, which he may not even know, is that when an abortion ban was put on the ballot in the state of Mississippi, the voters overwhelmingly defeated it. So it is important that the people have their say, but unfortunately, I think the Republicans now want this to be government making decisions for private individuals about their pregnancy, and there could be no personal important right that people have.
Yeah, and we're going to actually spend a little bit of time talking about that later on in the program, just whether or not democracy and the will of the majority is being reflected through the Supreme Court, through the nomination process, through the confirmation process, and ultimately through the decision-making process. And we're going to argue that it's not very democratic the way the system currently is operating when you're talking about half of our population. But I want to play for you something that Justice Roberts had to say about this issue of viability. Listen.
The thing that is at issue before us today is 15 weeks. That's not a dramatic departure from viability. Why is 15 weeks not enough time?
All right, so some have viewed this as the, quote, moderate Roberts floating a compromise here. But even if this is the best case scenario, how will a 15-week cutoff impact people trying to seek an abortion?
I mean, as was said in the argument, it has all kinds of impact because the decision about a pregnancy is such a personal one. It's one that a woman has to be able to make with her doctor, her medical provider. Justice Roberts has never been pregnant. I don't think he has any way of knowing the complexity of these issues that women face. And that's why it's important that women make their decisions about pregnancy, not government. It was really sort of an extraordinary moment. And I would also point out, as has been said by others, there was no rationale for that. And in fact, there was really no rationale for anyone. As Justice Sotomayor said, nothing has changed in 50 years since Roe was decided. Women still need access to safe and legal abortion. Women need their fundamental rights. The American public, 80% of the American people believe this is a right that pregnant people and women should have. The only thing that's changed is politics. And there was really no rationale that any of the justices could give of why they would take away this fundamental right that women have had for now nearly 50 years.
Yeah, I think it's the politics that has changed, and we know what this politics and this political decision means for the Republican base that led to these appointees. And the sad reality is, Cecile, we kind of have an offering into how a near total abortion ban will look like because of what we're seeing play out in Texas. You have people with the ability and means to do so traveling across state lines, and unfortunately those unable are forced to carry unwanted pregnancies to term. Next year, it's very likely that this won't just be a Texas problem. How will abortion providers have to adapt to make sure women aren't left behind if, in fact, Roe versus Wade is overturned?
I'm so glad you raised Texas, because anyone who thinks that this Supreme Court, that they're only deciding about Mississippi. We have had this ban, a 6-week abortion ban that has been in effect in Texas now for nearly, or actually now more than 3 months. That means millions and millions of women lost their rights overnight. And of course, the inability to access safe and legal abortion is disproportionately falling on young women, people in rural areas, women of color, women with low incomes. And as a result of the Mississippi case, and I know you showed the map earlier, it's so important to know, this is not just about Mississippi and Texas. This is actually about 26 states that are poised to have a total ban on abortion or partial ban on abortion. That is really frightening. This is coming to a state near you. And so this is an issue that everyone in this country should care about. Abortion providers and doctors are doing their very best to take care for their patients, but it is impossible when politics is put ahead of the well-being of the women that they take care of.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about whether or not Democrats can actually seize on this politically and mobilize people to know what's at stake in the midterms and going forward. Cecile Richards, I know it's a busy week for you. Thank you so much for spending some of your Saturday